Does everybody see it?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know if you guys, this past week's Parsha, it's Ela Mishpatim Asher Tasim Lifneihem. These are the laws, the civil laws that I put before you, and referring to the judges who are going to run the civil society. And then he goes into interesting first mitzvah, which we're going to get back to, is the Eved Ivri, we'll call it the Jewish slave. But a little distance into it, where he talks about all the different laws of civil law, of damages, and of returning lost objects. He has different requirements for the judges themselves. So who'd like to read from verse 6?
Okay, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Thou shalt not rest the judgment of thy poor in his cause. Keep thee far from a false matter, and the innocent and righteous slay thou not, for I will not justify the wicked.
Okay, all right, so which means he's talking about, this is who is addressed in this commandments?
Perhaps the judges, I guess?
Exactly. This is how they have to conduct the system of justice. So they can't incline judgment of the poor. In other words, there's always injustice is a little bit difficult because, for example, in America, who do people have natural sympathies toward? The poor or the corporation?
The poor.
The poor. Now, it could be, the poor guy or let's say the big behemoth insurance company. Now, it could very well be that the poor guy is trying to rip off the insurance company. So we can't mix up. A person will say that, look, this insurance company is worth $50 billion, and this poor individual guy is on food stamps. What is it going to hurt if we award a judgment for this poor guy for $500,000? It won't even make a dent. It won't even make a microscopic dent in the balance sheet of this corporation. So what does the pasuk tell us? Lo tatem mishpat evin chaparivo. Don't push the judgment of the poor in his fight in either direction. In other words, there's a motivation to be unjust and have sympathy and use the court system to be an instrument of tzedakah. We have a system of tzedakah, and we have a system of mishpat, of justice. And what's the Torah warning us?
Not to conflate the two.
Exactly.
But do you think the pasuk implies not to tilt in the poor's favor, or the other way, or both?
Both.
Both. Okay.
Because also the other motion is to say he is a nobody, and if I curry favor with the corporation, I will get stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So there's always an emotion both the ways, and the judges are obligated to adjudicate justly. That's why it says, from a false matter you should keep away, and the innocent and the righteous you should not kill, for I will not justify the wicked. So there's a tremendous focus here on what we call social justice. You know what I'm saying? Let's go on. 8.
Okay. And thou shalt take no gift, for a gift blindeth them that have sight, and perverteth the words of the righteous.
Right. So they can't take any bribes.
Right.
Or anything. So in other words, they have to be as objective as possible.
And the stranger shall thou not oppress, for ye know the heart of a stranger, seeing ye were strangers in the land of Egypt.
Right. Now, is it talking about the ger, or talking about the convert, or the ger toshav, who's the different possibilities? I'll get into that. But it could be through the court system, or it could be talking about the general population, that you cannot that you have to be concerned about people who don't have a strong social network. You can't oppress them.
Rabbi, whenever I see this pasuk, when I read it last week, I was thinking how Israel, it's so important that it not oppress its own minorities, because it's directly spoken about in this pasuk.
Yes, we're going to get to that. We're going to go into the connection of Shabbos and social justice in about 5 seconds. Go on.
Okay. And 6 years thou shalt sow the land and gather in the increase thereof. But the 7th year thou shalt not let it rest and lie fallow. Thou shalt let it rest and lie fallow, that the poor of thy people may eat, and what they leave the beast of the field shall eat. In like manner thou shalt deal with thy vineyard and with thy olive yard.
So we have the idea of what they call Shemitah. The reason expressed in Mishpatim, the presentation here in Mishpatim, and again, it's expressed a number of times in the Chumash, is a benefit of part of it become part of the charitable safety net. That 1/7 of these people, that there is no in the land of Israel, there is no personal property.
And Penny, what's the parallel, if any, that we're supposed to draw between resting on the 7th day for Shabbat and having the land rest?
It's coming up in one verse.
Got it.
We're coming right there. Right now. Go on.
Okay.
This point.
Okay. 6 days thou shalt do thy work, but on the 7th day thou shalt rest, that thine ox and thine ass may have rest, and the son of thy handmaid and the stranger may be refreshed.
So the right after the Torah talks about Shemitah, it talks about Shabbos. 6 days you shall do your work, and the 7th day you shall tishbos. Uvayom haShabbat shvi tishbos. So there's a positive commandment of ceasing, being in a positive state, not just abstaining from it, but being in a positive state. Why? L'man yanuach, so that they should rest. Your oxen and your donkey and the slave and the stranger will be refreshed. What is a natural tendency to do to your employees?
Work them, but that comes up on Shabbat, because in so many households, there are people who are working who are, let's say, not Jewish on Shabbat. I always get confused about how that all works out for us.
Right. So again, there, like many aspects of Jewish law, there are ways to quote unquote work around that. But the general principle is that part of the benefit and the social justice of Shabbos is that the society should rest. Which, by the way, in the ancient world was unheard of. The only people that rested were the aristocracy. You know what I'm saying? And in fact, in ancient times, the Jews were viewed as lazy because 1/7 of their life they did not work.
My parents are taking a course, and my mother told me that there's one culture that rests every 10 days in the Middle East, an ancient culture that rested every 10th day.
Okay.
But I haven't found it yet. I've been looking for it.
Okay. We don't say that non-Jews can't come up with good ideas as well. I just want to let you know, yesh chachma b'goyim, the Talmud says. There is wisdom among the Gentiles. So, God gave them minds, Sel Melokim, they can come up with some good ideas themselves.
And also, Adam wasn't Jewish, and God spoke to Adam.
Correct. Nor technically was Noah or Avram.
Mm-hmm.
So, until there was the Har Sinai, when there was the covenant of the Jewish people were officially launched through the covenant of Sinai. Yeah. Now, so you see clearly here is that, now notice, this is chapter, just to scroll up, this is chapter 23. The book of the Parsha Mishpatim starts on 21. So what do you see is that that Moshe Rabbeinu's presentation brings the pinnacle of Shabbos, which is Uvayom HaShavi Tishbos, you shall rest, is only after 2.5 chapters of all the laws of civil law, between man and his fellow, and how to govern a society. So the true benefits of the spiritual retreat, which is Shabbos, is in a framework of civil law. So I want to ask you a simple question. Why is that? Why do the Jewish people have to be educated, quote unquote, with 2.5 chapters of nearly like 40, 50 individual mitzvahs between man and his friend, how to govern his financial, economic ways? Is that a prerequisite for Shabbos to be done in the full way?
I mean, we think of Shabbos as being a time for socialization and connecting with other people, not just connecting with oneself or with God, in part, but I'm still not following.
Well, maybe you can't have a spiritual retreat if you don't have, some kind of peace. And also maybe it shows that social laws are as important, if not more important, ultimately.
Correct. That's correct. In other words, the person who's ripping off his neighbor, who's cheating in business, who's oppressing his workers, who's using the courts as a system of extortion, cannot, well, by definition, have, well, what's his worldview by definition?
It's selfish, cynical.
So either he believes that he is the supreme being of the universe, or he's the essential creation of the universe, and everything else is just a tool for his enjoyment. So the primary message is that all creation is a Tselem Elohim, is God given in the image of God, and they have fundamental and inalienable rights. And therefore, in a certain sense, my fellow is no better than me. He's no worse than me, even though my narcissistic feelings is different. But objectively, there's no difference. But
does Judaism emphasize more to be ethical to your fellow Jew than to your fellow non-Jew?
There's a basic level of ethics and civility and morality for all people. Kavod habrios, as the Talmud tells us. But for your people of your mishpach, of your family, your people, you have like your brother and your sister, which is the way the Torah is supposed to wants you to relate to every Jew. You have a deeper and more profound obligation.
But isn't it true that in some Orthodox circles, there's so much emphasis placed on the ideas between man and God that there's less emphasis on perfect honesty in terms of, trying to, rip off the U.S. government in terms of, Social Security and all that stuff. So how do you explain that? If our religion emphasizes this, why are Jews known to be more schemers than other people? Because
I don't know if we are more schemers than everybody else, but we are certainly very adept at it, and that's one of our unfortunate characteristics. The point being is that's exactly what Moshe is trying to tell you. He doesn't go right to ritual law. Right after the Aseret Sedibros, what would you expect him to talk about? Davening and the kosher laws and keeping Shabbos, and in that time the laws of the offerings and Pesach and the holidays, right? All the ritual law. What does God tell Moshe? Elu hamishpatim asher tasim lifneim. These are the statutes you must place before them. So that's exactly the point. Now, Gilad, if you look through the book of Isaiah, Isaiah 1, we actually did Isaiah 1 in our fellowship, and also Isaiah 58, which is part of the Haftarah read on Yom Kippur, and on Isaiah 54. This is exactly the problem. Jews feeling a overwhelming sense of religious narcissism of superiority, despite their ignoring of the basic laws of civil law, of morality. You know what I'm saying? So this has been a fundamental problem since Moshe Rabbeinu starts off from the 1 second after Har Sinai. So this is not a small thing. This is the thing.
But you're suggesting that the juxtaposition of Shabbat next to all of the civil law is not just a coincidence, or is not just something to ignore, but rather something to focus on, that by being so close to one another, it's suggesting a way in which we're supposed to be doing Shabbat, or that without these things in place, Shabbat is not meaningful, and that it loses its context.
If a person is not ethically excellent, there's a limit to what a Shabbos can be. It's going to be either a time for more business, i.e., the Kiddush as excellent networking opportunity, or it's going to be another long weekend where you can relax a little bit from taking a break from ripping off your friend, to recharge for another week of crooked business dealings.
It's amazing, because I really don't feel like that's how we think of or convey Shabbos. The same way, like last week, you were talking about Shabbat as a spiritual retreat. It just seems like that's a whole nother perspective that isn't often shared, looked at, exposed, discussed.
Correct. It's not.
Even in a modern Orthodox synagogue or in a Kiruv organization. This is
right, but we're changing that.
So what sort of does the ideal Shabbos look like then in your mind, given all this?
Well, so one of them is a focus of a focus on some of the prerequisite laws of Mishpatim. I think that's why I want to talk a little bit about something which is so weird to our ears, the Jewish slave, which is ironically the first set of laws that Moshe talks about. I want to get into that. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So, because it's something which is, it seems to the basic humanist mind, something which is, crazy, bizarre. So, but Shira, what you said, I think I want to repeat that, because I think it's very important for people to hear that clearly and succinctly, which is that there can't be a spiritual retreat where you're refining your notion of God if a person is involved in theft and unjust business dealings. Their definition of God is going to be distorted. So in a certain sense, this Shabbos will not help. In terms of being a just person is a prerequisite for Shabbos to do its thing. You know what I'm saying? You can't have a spiritual retreat if you're not just. You're not ethical. What are you celebrating? What possibly could your idea of God be? Going to be something. There's something really wrong. So notice that Moshe Rabbeinu, that's unbelievable. After the Aseret Dibros, which is the sort of the overview of the entire Torah system, God tells Moshe to tell the Jews about the Mishpatim. And Shabbos is woven into the system of Mishpatim. And the Rambam, when he talks about the mitzvah of Shabbos, says the positive member is the Tishbos, is you shall rest. But it's with the benefits to the people. And it's within the context of the civil law. So I threw out today a little bit of a interesting question, is that should the state of Israel today bring back the institution of the Jewish slave? What do you guys say?
I mean, on first blush, the whole idea of slavery as a whole, is sort of nauseating, and it sort of makes us, I think, on the whole, feel like this is completely something that never should have been, and certainly is past its prime. But at the same time, I'm sure you're going to share with us a little bit about the difference in this concept of slavery that's described in the Torah than the slavery we conjure up when we first think of it. and that somehow we're going out of our way to be kind to a slave. But it's very hard to wrap your head around. That's just a guess that you're heading in that direction.
Right you are. Right you are. So right. So when we that the Torah opens up. Let's take it from the top of the parsha here, which was this week's parsha. Let's read it out. Who would like to read? I did a great job before. Go ahead, do your magic.
Oh, me again?
Yeah, you again.
Okay. Okay, here goes. Now these are the ordinances which thou shalt set before them. If you buy a Hebrew servant, 6 years he shall serve, and in the 7th he shall go out free for nothing. And if he come in by himself, he shall go out by himself. If he be married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master give him a wife, and she bear him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out by himself. But if the servant shall plainly say, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out free, then his master shall bring him unto God, and shall bring him to the door, or unto the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear through with an awl, and he shall serve him forever.
Okay. I'll read a little more.
Okay. Can you scroll?
Okay, let me scroll. Hold on. All right, let's leave it like that. Let's go. This is the basic point. So, what's the basic law of the Eved Ivri?
That he shall be set free on the 7th year.
Sounds like the Shemitah year or the Shabbat, the 7th day. You know, all these sevens that things are freed or laid to rest.
Right. So what is the? So now we need some Torah Sheba'al Peh. Who is the Eved Ivri? Under what circumstances the Eved Ivri? So I'm going to bring up from the, hold on, I'm going to bring up from our good people of Chabad who are going to help us out. Hold on, I'm going to get you the Rambam.
Okay, you can see both these. Both here.
So, gotta love the internet. All right, so let's see what the Rambam says about this. Chapter 1.
So this is Rambam in chapter 1 of his book?
Chapter 1 of the laws of Avadim.
Uh-huh. And what book is that in?
Sefer Kinyan.
Uh-huh, okay.
I'll read it out.
Sure you can.
Okay. The term Hebrew servant used by the Torah refers to a Jew whom the court sells by compulsion or a person who sells himself willingly. What is implied? When a person steals and does not have the resources to repay the principal, the court sells him, as we have explained in Hilkot Geneva.
All right, so go on.
No other Jewish person is sold by this court, except a thief. Concerning such a thief sold by the court, Exodus 21:2 states, when you acquire a Hebrew servant, and concerning this person, Deuteronomy 15:12 states, when your Jewish brother will be sold to you. To what does the term a person who sells himself refer? When a Jew becomes sorely impoverished, the Torah gives him permission to sell himself as a servant, as Leviticus 25:39 states, when your brother will become impoverished and be sold to you. A person is not allowed to sell himself as a servant and stash away the money, use it to buy merchandise or utensils, or give it to his creditor. He may sell himself only when he needs the money for his very livelihood. A person is not permitted to sell himself unless he has no property remaining at all, i.e., even his clothing no longer remains. Only in such a situation may he sell himself. That's the halakha one.
Okay. So already we start to have a departure. When I say the word slave, immediately you're thinking of, for example, the movie just came out, 12 Years a Slave, where a person is taken as human property and is viciously, what's the term? Viciously tortured and humiliated in the most grotesque manner, which would characterize the American slave experience of the 17th and 18th and the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. Already, the Hebrew slave is whom? Two cases. Only two cases.
Someone who's stolen and someone who's so poor that
and what?
Stolen and
cannot pay it back.
Is so poor.
Yeah. In other words, the guy stole $300,000 and he goes to Vegas and he loses on the craps table and he has no resources, so the Beis Din takes him and sells him. Okay? And what's the second case?
That he sells himself because he's so poor.
How poor do you have to be?
No clothing even.
Right, in other words, you've hit absolute rock bottom. And then only then are you allowed to be the base that will allow you to sell yourself. So basically, being a slave is viewed what? Is viewed as what? Either going to be a rehabilitation of the thief, or is going to be, and this is the key point, an adult foster care for the person. Now the question is, well, how did the person fall down so far? What happened? What happened? What must have already failed the guy?
His own self, his own behavior failed him, I guess.
Well, first of all, he himself, most likely, he himself, he doesn't have the life skills to be successful to hold down a job. Either he's got psychological issues or whatever, or bad muscle. And the bottom line is he doesn't have any resources. Two, then the community is supposed to step in, right? We have the concept of tzedakah. But what's happened then? He's burned through all of that. So what's the last step for the guy?
So this is supposed to be a safety net we're describing this as.
This is the last safety net. Now, here's a key point, and I want to share you something about this halacha. Let me get to the actual...
Penny, this is such a great example of something that could be read sort of at the surface and so sorely misunderstood and really cause problems down the line.
Okay, so that's what we're learning. Right. There's a whole bunch of halachas here, but I'm gonna basically I'm gonna pick you the key halacha, which you're gonna knock your socks off. Halacha 9. Read this one.
A master is obligated to treat any Hebrew servant or maidservant as his equal with regard to food, drink, clothing, and living quarters, as implied by Deuteronomy 15:16. For it is good for him with you. The master should not eat bread made from fine flour with the servant eating bread from coarse flour. The master should not drink aged wine while the servant drinks fresh wine. The master should not sleep on cushions while the servant sleeps on straw. nor should the master live in a walled city while the servant lives in a village, or the master live in a village while the servant lives in a walled city, as implied by Leviticus 25:41, and he shall leave you. On this basis, our sages said, whoever purchases a Hebrew servant purchases a master for himself. A master must treat his servant with brotherly love, as implied by Leviticus 25:46. And with regard to your brothers, the children of Israel, nevertheless, the servant himself must conduct himself as a servant with regard to those tasks he must perform.
All right, so let's say you have acquired a Jewish slave, and you're going to have steak. What is he eating?
Steak.
Let's say you are sleeping on 80-count fine Egyptian cotton sheets. What is he sleeping on?
The same.
Okay, so in fact, so is it a good deal to own a Jewish slave?
Seems like an expensive hobby.
Well, they say, Chazal say, whoever purchases a Hebrew slave purchases a master for himself, because it becomes a very deep obligation. Because basically, what are you involved in? And this is true. We have a sense that anybody who's a foster parent in America is the closest example we have. Okay, when a family, a nuclear family, whatever, finds it in their heart, they want to help. They will say they were not blessed with children, or they feel they want to help society, and they take a child in for a short amount of time, and they give them, love, and they give them life skills, and they give them food and clothing and shelter and stability where the other person is not. This is what the Eved Ivri is. Okay? Now, there's two kinds of Eved Ivris. There's the one who is so destitute, he's burned through all the different, safety nets, that this is the only one, which is basically called as an adult adoption. Then we have a guy who's a thief. He also needs a rehabilitation. Now, to the humanist perspective, this seems intrinsically something which is, offensive. But let's take a look in America. How many people in America occupy penitentiaries?
I think about 2 million.
Exactly, 2 million.
2 million.
How many women are involved in prostitution?
All of them?
Excuse me?
I mean, not all of them.
Says my husband.
I'm kidding.
It's a little confusing.
But let's do a take two. How many women in America are involved in prostitution? I mean, I don't know the number, but it's not small. And how many of add the men they are servicing?
Rabbi, I was just reading today in the New York Times, about how they're expecting to have 10,000 prostitutes brought to New York City because of the Super Bowl. And they're trying to avoid that. The police are trying to prevent that. But that's what happened in Miami. So I think that answers your question. There's a lot.
10,000?
Yes. Just in New York City because of the Super Bowl.
Okay. Now, why does a woman turn to prostitution? It's going to be in part because that's one of her coping mechanisms of dealing with her impoverished circumstance. A woman does not, by design, turn to prostitution because she's living a robust, stable, balanced existence. It's some major trauma and circumstance that are causing her to be put into circumstance. You know what I mean? So in our anti-slavery mentality, we have a lot of, so instead of dealing with a problem properly, we just create these massive cities called penitentiaries where we put millions of people away. This is not to talk about all the undocumented aliens that are also oppressed in a great manner as well. So in the Jewish society, so Moshe steps off Har Sinai. And he tells the Jews, these are the mishpatim that I'm going to tell you about. Now, the Jews, remember, were 49 days ago, 50 days ago, they themselves were slaves. And he tells them about this new institution. We're going to have slavery, but instead of an act of oppression, it's going to be an institution of kindness. Instead of an act of lording over your fellow, it's in a way of picking up your fellow, of rehabilitating your fellow. When all things of their life have fallen apart, when every wheel of their wagon have fallen off, you need to step up to the plate.
So, Penny,
yeah.
Sorry, maybe you're trying to address this now, but my question was just sort of, if slavery has a negative connotation and you could choose any word and any phrase in the world to describe this new form of kindness or this new safety net, why choose the term slavery? And are you suggesting that maybe it's because it was meaningful to them in the context of their negative context of slavery?
Well, the word, I guess the better way of saying of Eved Ivri is a Hebrew servant.
Right.
So it's a better translation. Unfortunately, the word slavery, and for very good reason, is synonymous with injustice. So I'll just use the Hebrew word, but the institution of Eved Ivri is, we just did two of the halachos, is institution of rehabilitation, of tzedakah, of chesed, and of taking care of the people who are destitute. Because in every society, you're going to have people who can't function properly. So do you want to lock them up? Do you want to have them walk the streets at night to pick up, walk the street for tricks with Johns and all that? Is that your solution? Or people take them in, and it's done by way. Are you able to do this yourself? It's done by the Beis Din. The court has to adjudicate this. Now it's also balanced. It's not forever. It's 6 years.
So is this sort of an example of how, because Christians don't have Torah Shebe'al Peh, they totally misunderstood this, and some of them use this to justify their slavery institution?
Yes, but I'm not going to whitewash the Jewish people, because the Jewish people themselves, if you look in Jeremiah, which was the Haftorah, where God told Jeremiah, tell the Jews, you need to release the slaves. Because even after 6 years, the guy can stay on till the Yovel, the 50th year, but no more. So God made a covenant with them to release the slaves. And the Jews, in fact, in the time of King Tzidkiyahu, did release the slaves. And what does the Haftarah tell that the Jews did after a short time later?
I don't know.
They recaptured them. And God said to them, because you did that, you are going to lose your sovereignty to King Nebuchadnezzar. You're not worthy of being the Jewish people on the land of Israel anymore. So it's something that, even though it's something which can be an act of kindness, but it's something, as you can see, is very subject to distortion. You know what I'm saying? There's a part of man that wants to rule his fellow. Take advantage.
What you were starting to say before, Penny, when you were saying that the Jews had essentially come out of a time of slavery only 50 days beforehand, before Sinai, and now are in a situation where they're being given this first set of laws from Moshe. And you're saying that these laws, not a coincidence, these are the first that we came to learn about. So are you suggesting that because they came from slavery, now learning about this gentler form of care is important because they've just come from a harsh situation? And what's the connection between where they came from and why this law now?
In other words, what Moshe is introducing is a paradigm shift. There is Egyptian law and there is Jewish law. Egyptian law is capture people are human resources that should be used for the benefit of the wealthy as much as possible. Jewish law is that a person has to help his fellow, and that there can be that the slavery, instead of being an act of oppression, is an act of kindness. But when all the different safety nets fail. But ideally, there shouldn't be slavery because tzedakah should be enough. The guy who loses his job, you get him another job. He needs some money for investment, you give him a loan. You know what I'm saying? As the Ram talks about the 8 levels of charity, which we will get through, God willing, later this year. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, thank you.
But if it doesn't happen, you don't want to be setting up. Do you know that in the Jewish court system there is no prisons?
No, it's interesting.
We don't lock people away.
So what do you do?
You try to work with them. Give them good role models. Make them part of the. Now, if a person's a crazy murderer, we do put them in we do confine them. We don't have people who are, serial killers running through the society. Obviously, there's ways to deal with that. But by and large, we don't have an idea that we can produce large, criminal societies living in penitentiaries.
Especially the way it is in America, where the sentences are so draconian.
Right.
20 years, 30 years.
Right. But also, we don't believe in just, but you have somebody, he has to do all the work. I mean, he's still working for the guy. He's a servant, has to do the work, but he's given a second chance.
So Rabbi, this seems, the way you explained it, is very, very enlightening. I mean, it's very, very appealing to me because it turns something bad to something very, very positive. But my question is, I guess, 2 questions. One is, if it's so good, why couldn't we apply it to all slaves, not just Jewish slaves? I want Judaism to be universal, not just particular to Jews.
So we didn't get to what they call the Eved Kanani.
Uh-huh.
So there's another, but also the Eved Kanani you can't oppress.
And the second thing,
under no circumstance can the Jews do what was done by the Americans and other societies to the black people. What was, you know what I'm saying? There's no such justification for that. Now, we can't create the institution in Israel today because it only can exist. Read number 10.
The institution of a Hebrew maidservant and that of a Hebrew servant is not practiced except in the time when the Jubilee year is observed. This applies both to a Hebrew servant who sells himself and to one who is sold by the court. We have already explained when the observance of the Jubilee year was nullified.
So this can only be done when the Jewish people are on a certain level, when their Jewish sovereignty is intact. You know what I'm saying? We're not really assumed to be on the level to really pull this off. You know what I'm saying? So it's a theoretical construct because we don't have sovereignty. We don't have because the Jubilee is when everybody goes free. You don't have that system. So what I'm sharing with you tonight is that the Torah has a different notion of social justice, which we don't see in the Western world. And unfortunately, we saw unbelievable injustice, and the Torah views as that servitude can be a positive rehabilitation, adult foster care, or we call it the tzedakah of last resort, and avoid the social horrors that we have today, which is 2 million people living in penitentiaries and hundreds of thousands of women selling themselves to strangers because they have no way to go. So there's an institution to deal with that. And it has to be done objectively, done by the courts, not done by people. There's no slave trade, buying and selling Jewish slaves. Doesn't exist. done in private. It was a private affair. You know, I just wanted to share that. So we were discussing a Shabbos, but in other words, this is a whole different world. That who would do this? This means I have a concern. It's like the people that have who adopt kids in foster care. They're very special people. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And this is what the Torah created as an institution to do this.
So, do you think Israel will ever live up to this Jewish idea of social justice?
Well, that's what we call it, the Messianic era.
I mean, I guess I never realized how different the Torah justice is than the West's idea.
Yes.
So
I will unfold that class by class.
So do you think maybe someday Israel will actually adopt these laws? Someday, maybe?
Right now, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if we're not up to this.
I see.
You know, right now, the law of Israel, well, first of all, it's struggling with an identity crisis. One of it is it's trying to out Western world, the other, you know, democratic republics of the Western world. And there's a good to that, you know. There's you know, if you don't have, it's not, there's a lot of good to the Western world, you know. But I mean, unfortunately, there's about 20. I mean, I don't know. There's tens of thousands of Jews locked up in Israeli penitentiaries. And you know, if you were in Tel Aviv, shall we say, seeing a prostitute is not an uncommon phenomenon.
Or even Jerusalem, including by Haredim, right?
Well, I mean, I don't know if I'm sure there are people, but I'm just saying these. I'm not concerned about the Johns that are visiting them. I'm concerned about the women that's their unfortunate choice of survival.
Rabbi, not only that, Israel is the number one perpetrator of sex slavery in the world. It's these Russian Jewish mafia.
Right.
I read about that.
Right. So I think that answers your question. So we're
Right.
far away from this ideal. But you're right. It's not known to people. And they read the first word, Jewish slave. They think of the famous TV documentary Roots, where you know, Kinto Kente, you know, was getting beaten. I don't know if this is ever before your time. It was a big deal back when I saw it in the 70s, whatever. But you know, that was a big shock. It brought the reality of Alex Haley's book. Brought the reality of American oppression of Afro-Americans in the, you know, the 1900s to sharp relief, 1800s to sharp relief.
But what bothers me is if this is the case, if this is how Judaism feels about slavery, why were the Jews who fought against slavery not Orthodox? I always ask this. The people who fought against this were not Orthodox Jews. The people who died in you know, Mississippi and all that, they were New Yorkers, but not Orthodox.
Well, there were Jews on. It's interesting. In the Civil War, there were Jews on both sides on the Confederate Union.
I know, but I'm saying
Jews. I mean, listen. You know, one thing you know about me, I'm not into whitewashing. There were Jews. There were plantation owners.
I know.
They liked their cotton picked for free.
I know, but why didn't Orthodox Jews from Brooklyn, you know, fight with Martin Luther King? Why were they buried in their Torah instead, and why were the non-Orthodox Jews were the ones fighting this?
Right. So this goes back to our earlier part of the thing of this goes back to the same question: is why is Moshe Rabbeinu giving 2.5 chapters of presentation of the civil law prior to reintroducing the pinnacle of Shabbos, of that one should be in a positive state of tishbos, of resting? telling you that a prerequisite for the Shabbos observer, which is one of the most important mitzvot, is a moral, social justice awareness here, which the Torah has its unique perspective. And you're right. And the Jews have been struggling from the time of Moshe till the very day, feeling good about themselves because they're very good, either on two extremes, totally immersed in quote unquote ritual, or involved in what the bourgeois of their time defines to them as being, involved in social justice. The upper class Protestant beliefs of the era. We're eco-friendly, we're egalitarian, we're all the different things that the bourgeois elite thinks is politically correct.
Okay, so
there's always been the two extremes, but the Torah, I'm just showing you, we're just reading the Psukim and the basic oral law. I'm just sharing, we're just gleaning from the surface.
Okay.
And it's not something that's really, and I agree with you 100%. It is something that's a perspective that's not, unfortunately, not being perceived.
Okay, so the same way there's organizations like MJE that try to bring kiruv to secular Jews, do they have organizations among the Orthodox that try to re-educate them to the basic values of Judaism?
Well, that's really the job of a Rebbe. I mean, is it? I think certain communities are doing a better job of that than others.
Is there a movement like any place in Judaism to say, hey, let's go back to more basic understanding, not for secular Jews, but for Orthodox Jews, to say we need a paradigm shift in how we think about these things? Because it always seems to me like they want to bring people like me closer to Judaism, closer to the fold, but maybe they're not closer to the fold either.
I'm saying yes. I mean, I don't want to. I'm not going to, let's say, assess all people with the same brushstroke. You know what I mean? I don't want to be involved in basic stereotypes.
I know. I don't either. I don't either. And I know
you're right. But I'm just saying I'm saying it's not so. What I'm arguing with is it's not so simple. There is a phenomena which even Moshe and Isaiah and Jeremiah speak about, which is a hiding, is using the ritual parts of Judaism as a way to hide yourself from being involved in the called the Bein Adam L'Chavero dimensions, and both are important. So,
do you think?
And I'll say more is that now important, and that the Bein Adam L'Chavero is a primary point. We're saying here tonight is that true Shabbos observance of being a spiritual retreat necessitates an appreciation of Bein Adam L'Chavero.
Okay,
by the way, what I want to do the next couple of weeks is to unpack a number of these ideas that Moshe talks about in the book of in the Parsha of Mishpatim, which is the basic civil law, to give you guys a basic flavor of what the basic core, and you're going to find it shocking.
Okay.
You've never heard this stuff before. So for many people, they're unaware.
But I guess what bothers me is that it's like in some circles, people make fun of Tikkun Olam as if it's like a new religion. But if that's the ultimate good, is social justice, then maybe I'll be...
Well, first of all, it's not the ultimate good.
I know, but I'm just saying,
for the ultimate good.
I'm just saying that that all these people that in the conservative and reform movements, I think Tikkun Olam is much more common, and so maybe Tikkun
Olam is becoming what Tikkun Olam basically for them is taking modern Protestant values, humanist values, humanist slash, postmodern Protestant values, and taking the aspects of Judaism that reflect that to the greatest extent, and saying that is the totality of Judaism.
So obviously it's not true. I mean, obviously that should not be the
Because the
totality.
bottom line is the essence of Judaism is God and relating to God.
Okay, right. I agree. It's not.
Olam is to create, first of all, to create a better world, but also a proper soul that can even possibly perceive God.
I agree. I just wish there would be a recalibration among, like, maybe the super Orthodox should learn from the super less Orthodox, and there should be like a recalibration, because we're all coming at it from ultimately, there's. I always keep wondering is how come people who are doing the most for social justice in the world are not Orthodox Jews, and maybe if you only have a limited amount of energy, maybe what's needed is a moderation within Orthodoxy, so that you can focus a bit less on ritual and a bit more on your fellow person.
But here's the thing: Beit Adam L'Chavero is not initially global; it's very, very local. You know what I'm saying? It's not grandiose. You know what it is? It's paying attention to the quiet desperation of the people who are around you. There's an unbelievable amount of tzedakah and chesed that we shield ourselves from. I'll ask you the following question. Does everybody know somebody who has lost the job? And have we done everything we can to help make sure they have a job? One of my jobs at MG, I deal with people, in the community that have, lost a job, and, it's rough. It's isolating. You know what I'm saying? So instead of like going to the Sudan and dealing with the injustices there, the Torah tells you got to deal with the injustices that are within your Dalet Amos first. You know what I mean? So instead of making a social justice an act of grandiose chesed, there has to be a sensitivity and a greater enlightenment and awareness of the chesed and requirements. Tikkun Olam, is very, very local. You know what I mean? That does the community you live in have a food bank for Jews that don't have food, who are in food crisis? Not going to the Sudan. You know what I'm saying? If a guy goes to Sudan and does not involve in the local, that's also a problem. You know what I'm saying? There's more. This is a massive topic. We're going to unpack this week by week. There's a lot here. I don't want to try to go beyond. This is a big chunk. I want you to meditate upon this, and we will continue.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
All the best. Have a good night, guys.
Take care.
All the best. Bye.